Always a good thing in and of itself. Reason to put a smile on your face right there. But another reason to put a smile on your face, it's time for and the return of Congressman Brad Wenstrup. Welcome back to the program, my friend. It's always good to talk with you.
You too, Brian. Thanks for having me on this morning. It's Friday. I'm in D.C.
Sorry.
By late afternoon, I will be back in the Queen City and looking forward to it.
Oh, I bet you are. Yeah. I feel badly for you being stuck in D.C. for any period of time. But let us start at the beginning. Beginning on the vaccine. It looks like it's, at least in Ohio now, they've freed it up for everyone who wants to get it, can get it. I keep reading statistics. I saw a story the other day that about half of the prison guards, the sheriffs and things in various prisons around the country are just don't want to get it. They either they don't think they need it, they're afraid of it. A lot of people I talk to, it's a regular conversation. Are you going to get the vaccine or not? Now, I feel I'm in a sort of different position since I had COVID already. As I'm reading, they have this new study out that surviving COVID-19 patients say it protects against reinfection for at least 6 months. Little less for elderly, so I feel like I'm protected for about 6 months. Question is, do I need to get a vaccine? Are you recommending people get the vaccine? How do you alleviate the concerns that people have who say they don't want the vaccine? Congressman Dr. Wenstrup.
Very good, Brian. No, you know what? I kind of admire those that have had COVID and have tested and shown that they have antibodies. And while supply is short of the vaccine, I think it's fair to say I want to wait and see. It probably is not a bad idea to see if you still have antibodies, 4 or 6 months later, and then make your decision based on that. But as the supply becomes increasing, I think it's good ultimately that even though you've had it, to get the vaccine. Now, no one wants to force this on anybody, but it is interesting because, anybody our age, Brian, we got all kinds of vaccinations from birth, and we didn't seem to fear those. But with this one, there's a lot there. And I understand a lot of hesitancy, and I actually spent time with a group of people that were very unlikely to take the vaccine. But we had a conversation about it. If I can sum it up for what most of the people said after we had long conversations explaining how it was processed and everything else, they said, what we really want is to be educated, not indoctrinated. And, they want that choice, but they want to make an educated choice.
Indeed.
And I totally get that. And one of the things that came out, I don't know if you've seen the commercial with the former presidents, except for Trump, they all said that commercial was a complete turnoff. And I get that. And I've been saying since I became a member of Congress, people trust me when I'm in my military uniform, which I've been giving vaccination shots in that uniform. People trust me when I have my white coat on, but they don't trust the congressional pin, and with good reason. And so, this is who people need to talk to. They need to talk to their doctors, talk about the risk versus benefit. And part of this conversation was interesting. We had Chris Christie, who got COVID, and he was talking about in one of the most protected places you could be, where everyone's tested in the White House, 6 out of 7 people got COVID, and some became very ill, including Hope Hicks, who was incredibly healthy. But when you go through and explain how the process was done, I'll just start with, Operation Warp Speed. That gave people the impression that things were just being rushed. When you explain that everything in every phase was done according to the standards that have always been there, and you explain that you cut out the paperwork, in other words, when you're in phase 1, you start the paperwork for phase 2 and the bureaucracy for phase 2 before you complete. That way, if you complete phase 1 and you're approved for phase 2, you're ready to go the next day. Same with phase 3, et cetera. And the other thing that we did quickly is if you made it to phase 3, we made 100 million vaccines or doses of vaccine to be ready in the event you were approved. So that's really where the speed came in. It wasn't cutting corners. It was cutting bureaucracy. And normally when a trial has 8,000 to 10,000 people in it before approval for a new drug, these had 30,000 to 50,000, making sure that they had the most vulnerable people in this. And when people heard things like, well, everyone who's been vaccinated and still got COVID, no one was hospitalized or died. That's an impressive figure, really, when you think about it, because we do hear people dying. Local figure that people probably remember, at least our age, Pat Berry, been around for years.
Yeah.
He passed away. So when you look at it and frame it in the right way, the people that we were talking to, a lot of them changed their minds. Said, I will consider it now.
Okay,
and
you addressed
understanding it.
You addressed the biggest concern that I've heard, which is, they did rush it through, and did they properly do these clinical trials? So you seem to be taking some comfort in that, yeah, they did it. They just got all the bureaucracy out of the way. So clinical trials were done. But then you have the follow-up question, which is, well, wait a second. Did they couldn't have possibly tested for some possible long-term effect of this virus, some negative thing that could happen with us, because it's made differently than prior viruses or prior vaccines. From what I understand, there's a genetically modified component to it, and there's a whole lot of people in the world that are freaked out about taking anything genetically modified. Congressman?
Yeah, this is not something that changes any of your DNA. People hear messenger RNA, which is ribonucleic acid, and DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. There's no correlation there with your DNA. Your DNA is not changed. This mRNA technology has been around for 20 years. But there's a supply and demand type thing with technology and for anything. And you need to have capital and you need to have a cause. And so this was the opportunity for the government to partner with private enterprise, with private research and development. Use this technology where, if I can put it simply, if you think of the little red thing projecting off of the virus, and it's not the virus itself, it's a protein that can be absorbed by the cells, create the antibody, and it's dismissed. It is not left hanging around in your body. So it is new technology, and that's the part that's kind of confusing for people. I think it's actually safer than some of the old technology where you're using a weakened or a dead virus to create the antibody response. But you're right. We don't know if it's going to help you for 6 months, for 6 years. That does remain to be seen, although the trials were fairly extended, so people were several months down the road. So that remains to be seen, whether you'll need a booster every year like the seasonal flu vaccine that people get. We'll have to see on that. But at the same time, we do know that some people, even younger people or people without a lot of comorbidities, are dying from this. It's really strange. That's a big unknown. We do know older. We do know with comorbidities. We do know in certain communities, like African-American communities, it's more prevalent. You add those things up, and you're at greater risk. But we are also seeing the strange case where, someone who seems perfectly healthy. We lost a newly elected member of Congress in his 40s who had no pre-existing conditions. He never got sworn in. He got COVID and died out of Louisiana. And so, so benefits versus risk, and that's why I suggest people talk to their doctor, talk about what they're seeing, what they're finding, and I think that's the proper way to go. And to go back to what some person in this conversation said, we just want to be educated, not indoctrinated, and I agree with that.
Yeah, well, that should be just the rule of thumb across the board on everything. Don't start telling us what to do.
Absolutely.
Give us foundation and help, and that'll allow us to make the educated decision that maybe you're looking for, although allow us to come to contrary conclusions as well. That's what it's like living in a free society.
You got it.
All right, well, we got more to talk about. Gun legislation, earmarks. Republicans are in favor of earmarks now. Immigration, the border situation falling apart. More with Congressman Brad Wenstrup. Congressman Brad Wenstrup getting ready to talk about gun legislation. Boy, they're on the warpath against going after our guns, taking little nibbles at a time. We had the Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2021 that passed, and we also had the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2021 that passed. Congressman Wenstrup, what is going on, and what's your tea leaf reading insofar as the Senate votes are concerned?
Well, I think a lot depends over there on whether they get rid of the filibuster or not. And everybody's kind of watching with bated breath, Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, as far as whether they're going to hold to their promise that we should not get rid of the filibuster. It's one of those things that comes back to bite you when you do it. The Democrats have seen it. They did it first with these judge selections, and it carried over. Then McConnell said, okay, well, we're going to do it too. So eventually what goes around comes around, but I hope that they're strong enough to hold on to that as it goes to the Senate. But we're seeing in the House of Representatives right now, every progressive, every liberal wish list just trying to be crammed through. We're going through a period right now in the House, Brian, where if there were any bills that they passed in the last Congress, they're just bringing them back directly to the floor without going through committee, as though there's not a new Congress, as though there's not a new group of members of Congress elected by the American people. It's really disturbing. But, I'll go back to the same argument I've made all along. One, we have a constitutional right to bear arms.
Yes.
And we want to maintain that. But you're never going to solve anything if you don't look at the root causes of violence. What are the events in someone's life that leads them to go and take the action that they have taken? You've got to address the cause, not just try and again, somebody dies in a car wreck. We haven't gotten rid of cars.
Right.
So,
but I guess we have sexual addiction now serving as a basis to commit mass murder. We've got kids that are just I'm going to use my DSM-5 term for this one, Dr. Congressman Wenstrup. Bat crap insane. There's a reason people go out and commit violence. It's not the gun itself, and you have the Democrats talking about taking away the protections that firearm manufacturers enjoy to keep them from being sued because some bat crap insane person decides to commit murder, which is already a crime on the books. How in the hell is it you can hold a firearms manufacturer responsible for the criminal acts of the end user? It's ridiculous. And
I would contend that guns may save as many lives as they might take away.
Of course.
I know at the baseball field 4 years ago, it was a gun that saved our lives because we were being challenged, actually outdueled by what this guy brought with him compared to what the Capitol Police had. It saved our lives. And, I'm old enough to go back, Brian, to the Manson murders, and those weren't done with guns.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, right. Stabbings. And it's funny. I had to I'm a concealed carry, advocate. I have a concealed carry license. I had my concealed carry firearm with me when this guy tried to kill me on the expressway, and I never really, getting a concealed carry. Never, ever thought I'd have to use it. I'm not one of those people that goes around paranoid all the time thinking that I'm going to be a victim of a crime, but I do know it is the great equalizer. And I had mine out when this guy got done just bashing the living crap out of my car coming up 71, hitting it with his truck. Turns out he stole that truck. Word has it he was on drugs, but I was ready to shoot him had he approached my car in a threatening manner. I never want to be there. But you know what? Thank God I was in a position to defend myself. This guy outweighed me by about double, and he was about 6-7 inches taller than me. I couldn't have defended myself against a crazed, drug-addled guy if it weren't for my firearm. But I felt awfully gosh darn happy I had it then.
No kidding. There's times when I have concealed carry, and there's times when I don't have it on me. And I find myself in a situation where I'm looking around and I'm thinking, well, I don't have it on me, but I want them to think that I do, and I'll posture as though I am carrying at that moment.
Yeah.
And, more and more you want it on you almost all the time.
Isn't that the truth? It's not going to help you if it's locked in a drawer somewhere. Congressman Wenstrup, we have more to talk about. Friday, we've got Congressman Brad Wenstrup here going over a whole variety of issues. And before we move over to earmarks and my profound disappointment at the Republican caucus the other day and their decision on earmarks, on the gun thing, Congressman Wenstrup, the Democrats obviously are the party that wants to control and or completely take away our guns. Ignoring the Second Amendment, they hate the Second Amendment. We can go on to the philosophical reasons why. I know they talk about wanting to protect us and save us from ourselves, but the law enforcement has, demonstrated, and maybe not so much law enforcement, but elected officials who are responsible for law enforcement have demonstrated just a tremendous amount of incompetence. If you look at the demonstrations over last year, the riots, the vandalism, the attacks on people, that has generated record numbers of firearm sales. I'm sure you've seen a number of articles on that the sales are through the charts. There's also more information. I see this article in the New York Post that someone just posted. Gun sales to Asian Americans have gone through the roof, and gun sales to minorities and women have increased dramatically. These are groups of people who otherwise normally are less inclined to buy firearms for whatever reason, but more and more people are acquiring them, which to me spells that suggests that they are waking up, regardless of their political affiliation, waking up to the reality that, no, there won't be someone there to save them in a moment's time, that there are always going to be delays, and sometimes, in the case of riots and property destruction and fires, the police won't even bother responding or showing up. So doesn't that represent a challenge to Democrats, Congressman Wenstrup, that they're the ones that are trying to take away that ability when more and more people are waking up to the reality that without a firearm, the great equalizer, I could be an absolute victim?
Well, it's like trying to pretend there's not evil in the world.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous. You allow people, basically the Democrats were pretty much good with people vandalizing and tearing cities apart, and yet they want to get rid of the police that protect them. And so people are saying, well, let's see, that doesn't add up very well. And now they want to take my gun. So I better make darn sure I have one before that happens, because look, things are happening now with this Democrat Party that I never thought I'd see. I really thought that, there was always this liberal reach. I get it. But it has gone so far, and the hypocrisy is so great. And I'd like to believe that America's starting to wake up to that. I've been here 8 years. The same people are still in charge of the Democrat Party in the House, Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer. And I will tell you that I think there's things they're doing now that they wouldn't have considered 8 years ago.
Right.
And that might be a good segue into the earmarks.
Yeah, it is, and we're definitely going to go there. I guess I wanted to follow up with another question on that point you just made with all this legislation that previously failed or didn't pass in the prior Congress that they're just bringing forward and voting on it. Are you seeing that lockstep uniform voting yes by all the Democrats on very leftist, really extremist sort of legislation that no Democrat would have voted for, let's say, 15 years ago? Are they all still going for it, or do you see some dissension and division among the ranks?
Well, they've done a good job over the years of getting rid of any blue dog Democrats.
Yeah.
If you're a pro-life Democrat, they've taken you out. Dan Lipinski from Illinois. His father was a member of Congress. He was a pro-life Democrat. They got rid of him. There's just a couple that are strong enough to still survive in their districts, probably because they're a little more center or right-leaning districts, and they're able to survive her. But she's gone after these people, and that's who they have left, by and large. There's a few that I trust over there, but they still end up voting with her. So, she is very good at controlling people, in so many ways. And these gun laws, for example, they only punish law-abiding citizens. That's the bottom line.
It is. Time and time again. It's, and also you can point out in most every single gun law that is proposed that has any chance of passing, it wouldn't have changed the outcome in any of these alleged mass shootings. In all the cases, the I's were dotted, the T's were crossed. The firearm was either purchased lawfully through an FFL background check or stolen outright from someone who purchased it lawfully. And you can't stop the crime of theft ever. You can tell people it's illegal to do it, and yet they'll still do it, particularly if they're bat crap insane and inclined to steal a gun in order to go out and murder a bunch of people. So, yeah, go back to your point that you can't get rid of all the evils in the world through legislation.
And I doubt that the evildoers are NRA members, if I could just say that. I really doubt it. I don't know a statistic on that, but I've never heard that they are. No, they're not. They're responsible firearms owners. Congressman Brad Wenstrup, let's get into the 7:39, coming up on 7:40 at 55 KRCD Talk Station. Brian Thomas. Enjoy my conversation with Congressman Wenstrup, as always. It'll be on the blog page later, 55krc.com. Forward a copy to your friends. Let's talk about the earmarks. I saw the Republican caucus the other day voted overwhelmingly to bring back earmarks.
Why, how, and why, Congressman Wenstrup? Just can you explain this to me, please?
Well, yeah. Let me give you all the background. First of all, I'm on the executive board of the Republican Study Committee, and we put out a statement ahead of time opposing earmarks. So I'll just say that getting rid of earmarks occurred under John Boehner. He was the one that drove that issue as Speaker. And, so getting rid of earmarks was not a law. It was a House rule. And probably a good idea when you look at the idea or the notion that so many people actually went to prison for how things were conducted.
Oh, yeah.
Quote unquote earmarks, right? And now the Democrats are in charge. They're leading this. They call it now community project funding. Oh. So they've taken the word earmarks out of it. And they do have some issues, some rules in there. There's kind of that tries to limit it. And, you got to have community support and some transparency. Well, the community.
What does that mean?
Support it, But, nonetheless, the argument has been from those that think that it should be brought back in some form or another is that really, as though we control the purse, we've ceded a lot of the power to the administration to decide where to spend the funds. Yet that still hasn't worked either. I vividly remember Barack Obama down in front of the Brent Spence Bridge saying, "I'm going to get you this bridge." It never happened. So, some people, they argue now, well, I don't trust the Biden administration to spend our tax dollars effectively. Matter of fact, they'll probably spend them punitively, by how people voted in that state or that location. So that's the argument. What Republicans voted on was just to put even more guidelines in, more transparency. The request has to be extremely public, and you have to know who is making the request, and you have to justify that the tax dollars should be spent, taxpayer dollars should be spent. So, like it or not, it's Democrats that brought it back, and they will use it. That's no doubt about it. So the resolution that was passed on the Republican side, it's a conference resolution, just put more restrictions on it than the Democrats have in theirs.
All right.
But they brought it back. Republicans didn't bring it back.
But they voted to approve the use of earmarks. That was the vote that kind of bothered me. I mean, you would think that in spite of the Democrats controlling the House and being able to do whatever the hell they want, that the Republicans would have stood on their old fiscal responsibility argument that doesn't seem to be followed anymore by any Republicans, to be quite candid. There were very few anyway that even think about fiscal responsibility and just at least symbolically said, hell no, we're not going to do this.
Yeah, it's like, when is the time, and when is the time that we start addressing mandatory spending and bring down our debt and quit spending, like drunken sailors, right?
Yeah. Donald Trump had an opportunity. He was not interested in even mentioning the deficit during his 4 years, and so that's a criticism I have of the administration for that. In spite of all the great things that happened, I'm not overlooking that. Yeah. But I'm a deficit hawk. I always have been. It's been one of my fundamental principles politically, that the government takes on too much obligation, and we are ignorant enough to think that they can actually solve our problems by throwing money at it, and never seems to care a whit about the financial burden they're placing on the next generations. It's an insane debt service amount, and it's going to consume virtually everything at some point.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because I always ask the question: what part about what we are passing gives Americans more freedom, and what part about it is the next generation going to say thank you for? Yeah. So how often are those two things met? Not very often right now under Democrat control, that's for sure. But with the tax cuts, we actually had increased revenues to the government because more people were working, more people were paying taxes, even though the taxes were less. But the problem was
spending
is still going out the door at a greater rate.
Yep.
And Trump used to say he'll address it in year 5. Well, we didn't get year 5.
It's easy to say that.
Yep.
Congressman Brad Wenstrup, everybody get your comments on the border, and if we have some time, maybe a thought or two about this Miller-Meeks Hart election situation. It is 7:49 right now, 55 KRCD Talk Station. Happy Friday. Brian Thomas here with Congressman Brad Wenstrup, wrapping up an hour of excellent conversation. And got to dive onto the border situation, which seems to be falling apart every day. Reports of just record numbers of folks trying to cross the border illegally that we haven't seen in 20 years. And it just keeps getting worse. And of course, Donald Trump Biden's been blamed because, in spite of the fact he will sort of nudge, wink, pay lip service to the idea of don't come now, all of his executive actions, eradicating Trump's orders, his decision to quit building more wall, on and on and on, have really egged on and encouraged people to make the wrong decision and head for our border, and probably encouraged by and at great cost because of coyotes. And they're all appear to be being released into the interior of the country. Congressman Wenstrup, what in the hell is going on?
It's beyond belief. And in a couple of weeks, I'll be going down there with the other doctors in Congress, which we've done before. And we went before the Trump administration really solved a lot of these problems. They solved these problems by making deals with, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, and with Mexico, and stay in Mexico. And now it looks like Biden's alluding to the remain in Mexico policy that Trump had in place. But you just go to Mayorkas, and he's telling people, don't make this dangerous trip now.
Right.
It's called dangerous trip, and that's exactly the point. Actually a very catchy line when we were talking about all the Dr. Seuss eliminations, if you will, cancel culture. One of the guys, John Katko, came up with a little Dr. Seuss type rhyme. He says, we've got disorder at the border by executive order. And he was one of the ones that went down with Kevin McCarthy last week to see what was going on. It's a humanitarian disgrace, and not really so much on our end. On our end in the United States, we're doing everything we can on the humanitarian front, and our Border Patrol and all those involved with it are just overwhelmed. There's no doubt about it. When Biden, they were just waiting for him to be elected to come.
Oh, yeah.
This is a win-win for the cartels. People have to understand, these people are paying sometimes their entire life savings for the cartels to take them up and bring them to the United States. That's who's getting them here. And look, some of them even have Biden T-shirts on. And when that happens, when our Border Patrol is overwhelmed, then the cartel is able to get more drugs into the country. They are winning on every front. And they are evil. What was reported to me several years ago, how they operate, there was a woman who was pregnant. Some of these people haven't paid their full fee yet when they come to the United States, and they're held in stash houses, it's called. And they live there until their relatives or whatever pay the cartel the rest of the fee before they let them go. And so there was a woman who was pregnant who wanted to wander off. She wanted to separate herself from the caravan, etc. They killed her. They killed her. And let's not forget what's going on as far as rapes and everything.
That's the horrific stuff I was thinking of, the absolute abuse that those people have to succumb to in order to, while they're waiting for the money to show up. I can't imagine.
This is a human tragedy, and really, in my mind, this administration right now is aiding and abetting the entire situation. And let's not forget, they're coming in with COVID and being released.
Yeah. If Governor Cuomo can get, crucified, and properly so, for putting a bunch of COVID-infected people in and amongst the most vulnerable population, the nursing home folks, what is the difference between that and having folks who have COVID-19 and letting them into the interior of our country? You're harming a population you're supposed to be looking out for. I don't find a whole big difference between the two, but Biden, there he is, getting away with it. I wish we had more time, Congressman Wenstrup. It is time for me to catch a Crime Stopper bad guy of the week, but I anxiously look forward to the next time you and I get to spend some time together and talk, and I appreciate the time you did so today with my listeners and me, and keep fighting the good fight.
We always enjoyed being with you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Stay well, take care of yourself, and best of health to your family as well.